Hey everybody, this is Chief RBC and we're continuing our series a little bit on lighting. As you see, we've taken the same scene that we had before and we've just dropped in a couple of spotlights into this, set them to a little bit of a color. If I select my spotlight, you can see I've got a little orange color on it. The range type is set to roughly 100 and these are spotlights. Now, right now, currently I have the mode set to real time. And we're going to talk a little bit about reflection probes and we're going to talk a little bit about lighting probes. Now, before we begin, let's start with our actual reflection probes and then we'll jump over into lighting probes. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to create a sphere. Let's go ahead. Oops, sorry. Didn't mean to create an empty. Let's create a sphere. I'm going to drop that sphere roughly about right here and put it in this. Let's make it a little bit bigger so it's looking right now. Now I want to come over and I want to create a material. So let's go ahead and call this, we can call this material reflection. That's fine. Okay. Going to make sure that that material is applied to our surface. So I just want to grab it up here and drag it onto that. If I come down to the reflection right here, I'm going to make this semi-dark on our color, and then I'm going to bump up the metallic. Now, anytime that you want reflections to happen, your metallic needs to be at a higher range. If we drop down the smoothness, you'll notice that smoothness and roughness, as we turn left and right, the further down the smoothness is, the more blurry it becomes. The higher you go, the more reflections that you have into the scene. Now, as of right now, we don't see any reflections that are happening in the scene. And so what we're going to need to do is a couple of things. Before we can even start to reflect, a reflection probe, so you understand it, works kind of like a camera that creates a cube map of your surrounding area and reflects it back onto the surfaces. But in order for that to happen, it is a baked process, meaning that you cannot have reflections that are happening, in essence, they have to be done baked first. Then they can reflect upon surfaces that are there. Otherwise, all your reflections are basically going to be completely black. And as we are seeing right now, overall, this is a very black looking material. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to create now a reflection probe. We're going to go into lighting, we're going to go down to reflection probe, and you'll notice that the reflection probe down here, it's got some reflection happening on it, but it's not reflecting any of our surrounding surfaces. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get that roughly within that range right there of the center. And you'll see that the reflection, it needs to be able to calculate as much of your objects as it possibly can. So you're going to come up here and we're going to edit the bounding volume. If I grab on the sides, you'll see it kind of starts to, I can get it on the outside. Oops, let me grab it right here and do that again. You can grab those little things and just kind of bring it. Make sure that what you're doing is you're getting what you want reflected. So in this case, we want to reflect the hallways here. We want to make sure that it's reflecting enough of the surface, okay, of the surrounding surface as we can possibly get. So I think that's going to do for us. Let me get that once again. Just make sure that our reflection sphere is happening. By the way, if you want to, you can snap that reflection sphere into that area. Okay, so now that we have our reflection in, you'll notice it's still kind of black and stuff like that. Well, in order for it to work, we need to make sure that we're setting it so that it can reflect the surrounding surfaces. Okay, so what we want to do is the only thing that can be reflected, as we talked about, is surfaces that are set to static. So we're going to come inside here and we're going to select every single one of our surfaces. Now this does not include lighting and things of that nature. All we're doing is selecting the objects that we want to be reflected into the sphere. And we're going to come up here and we're going to set them to static right here, okay? Now we can tag this. Now, one of the things we want to make sure we do before this is, by the way, if you click on the static right up here in the upper right, you want to make sure that you have that turned off. We want everything that we have selected, make sure that it's selected over here, and we're going to change the order because we don't really want to be calculating a whole bunch of static objects and we don't want to be baking light maps. We just want to come over here to the drop down and we want to turn on reflection probe static, okay? Now what it will do is it will bake only the things that are in the hallway instead of the things that we don't want to build a brand new light map on this. Okay, now that we have it set to static, and we want to make sure, I'm just repeating here, reflection probe set to static, we want to come up to our windows, we want to come down to rendering, we want to go to lighting settings, and I'm going to dock this real quick because I hate having it just sitting out here. Okay, under lighting, we want to make sure that we come down to the bottom where it says auto generate. Okay, we're going to turn that off, and we're going to go to generate lighting, and we're just going to bake reflection probes inside this thing. Okay, now that that has baked for me, you can see here we now have reflections. It is now reflecting the surface everywhere in all directions. Now notice that I did not set this object, which is a movable object, to static. It can reflect those, and it has baked it. Now if I move it back and forth, now granted, this scene I know is not a great scene for reflections and stuff like that, so please bear with me. But if you'll notice now that when I move the object back and forth, we're getting some really beautiful reflections happening on the surface. So a couple of repeats. I'm just going to go through this one more time. Number one, if you want to reflect surfaces, you need to have a high metallic set on your objects that you're going to be reflecting. Number two, you want to make sure that all of your scene has that you want reflected, everything that you want reflected that you're going to see. Now, granted, you probably don't really want to have massive areas of reflection probes everywhere, but you might have hallways that you want to reflect in all directions for your metallic surfaces. You want to just make sure that you put that reflection probe, if I select it right here, to select those areas that you want reflected, and that everything within there is set to static. Only make sure it's not, you don't click on this so you're not generating a light probe. Make sure you have it set to reflection probe static. Then you want to make sure that you come down into your lighting at the bottom and generate lighting, turn off auto generate, and generate for baked reflections. Okay, now a lot of you guys have been having problems with auto generate turned on and stuff like that. If you want to bake your selections and stuff like that, you want to bake lighting and things like that, just remember, if we grab all of these surfaces right here at this moment, if I grab everything except for stuff, all right, and if I want to make sure that these things are being baked out correctly, I want to come over here and I want to set static. I want to come down to my lighting. Instead of generating automatically, I'm going to come down here now and auto generate it myself. Okay, and you just let that run. Now, if your scene's huge, it's going to take a moment to do this. It won't give you a time frame or an ETA. See down here, the ETA says 17, 16, 15. Okay, usually that will be gone and you won't see that happening. But what it's going to do is it's going to bake all your lighting at the very end. I would suggest you just walk away, take off, and let your computer have fun. And once that's done, you're going to see all the lighting baked in. But if you're not wanting to do that and you don't want to bake lighting at the moment and you're just wanting to bake in your reflection probes, you can just hit force stop, make sure everything's turned off, that you have all your static objects inside your inspector. Whoops, hold on here. It's creating a lame looking one right here, but you just want to make sure you're generating bake reflection probes, and now all your reflected surfaces will work. Okay, if you have any questions about that, please contact me. I'll be happy to walk you through that again. So we're going to stop right here and start on the next one.